So I believe most people don't know what they're gonna do until they're like old. And so I wouldn't say that I knew about design, especially when I was young, but I knew it was something related to the creative field, especially because when I was really young, I used to make these like dishes for my mom and I would decorate the plate and everything, but it was not about what her reaction was going to be. It was about which one she was going to choose. And that sort of gave me an idea which color sort of increases attraction from people, and red is what people go to first, and green is second, and all of those things. So I think I was really interested in colors and really interested in the behaviors that it includes when people interact with.
So you did that at a young age, and then as you saw more possibilities, you said, okay, this is the field I want to go into. And then how did you make your choices around like what program to study in and specialties to kind of explore that type of thing?
I was really interested in animation in the start, but then I realized that animation was just going to be drawing characters, and I think I wanted to do more than that. And I feel like advertising in general, the entire industry is really broad, that it gives you opportunities to do everything and anything that you really want. And I feel like just as a designer, to be able to create things on as a visual that could make people react in certain ways was really interesting for me. So graphic design was something that gave me an idea about colors. It gave me an idea about advertising and all these things. And I felt like that's why that was like the right choice for me.
And I think a lot of us, when we go through school, they teach us sort of like here are some good approaches to take when you're approaching design. And in some cases, it may be saying, "Hey, let's all do it this way." In other cases, they give you tools and different processes. Do you feel like your approach to design is different than others, or would you say there's an approach that you really subscribe to and you like to approach it this way?
I don't know if it's completely different because obviously there are so many rules that help us come to the point where we need to. And school is a big part of that. It teaches you how to get from point A to point B. But I definitely feel like there's one thing which is definitely not original, but I believe in for sure, is I am very scared of a blank page. And so for me, having a layout, having a template, having a grid set up on my own, like I know that this is what the result is going to be. So these are the kind of grids I want to set, is very helpful for me. So I feel like that is my approach for sure. Any design, any project that I start, I need to do a lot of homework and background work before I jump into it, because I feel like that helps me solidify the foundation a little more.
Yeah. So it sounds like you also like probably constraints. You like to be boxed in just a little
Oh,
bit.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Everyone tells you to think out of the box. I feel like the box lets you think better, because it tells you exactly where you need to be, and then you can keep you can let your ideas flow. When you don't have any sort of things to go off of, it's not really in the right direction sometimes, and you have to go back and forth. So I feel like I like the box, but I also like jumping out of the box sometimes.
You got to have a box to jump out of, right?
Absolutely.
When
Absolutely.
when it's a completely blank canvas, there's
Absolutely.
nothing to go up against, right?
For
And
sure.
it's frustrating, and I think it makes for people kind of wondering. The sea of possibilities are too vast at that point.
Definitely. And I feel like my minor OCD helps me with this love of grids. And so it makes me right for being a designer.
Is there anything in the past year you would say that feels like an epiphany or an aha, or you recognize in your approach has matured to this level? Is there anything recently you would say, yeah, I've gotten to this, or I'm noticing this, or anything like that?
For sure. I feel like in general, last year it was a very big change for me because I graduated, and coming out of school, I learned all the things and I felt like I was ready. But then when I actually started and it comes like, oh, you're a full-time designer and you have to do this for a living, I feel like that definitely made a big change in my mentality. And I feel like before I was just doing things because I was enjoying it. Now I do things because I want to do it, and I want it to get to a point where it actually makes sense. So I feel like that has changed. I'm not designing things now anymore that just because I like how it looks. I feel like I want to make it in a way that it benefits people, or it does something, or it has a motive, or it has a why behind it.
Yeah, that's a really key, I think, lesson for us to learn because especially when you're doing something as fun as design, it's really tempting to just do the things that kind of are fun and turn us on. But then you realize like, oh, this is a job and it doesn't need to be less fun. It just maybe needs to be more meaningful. And now it's less about my own fulfillment. Maybe how does this effective for somebody else, right?
Absolutely, because before graduating, it was student projects. Now these are projects that people are actually looking at and maybe are going to buy products after looking at the ad or maybe looking at the billboard. And so I feel like it needs to make a lot more sense and it needs to be more towards function than just like decoration.
Um, there's a there's a funny thing I think in design world where I think a lot of designers are very idealistic people and some designers believe they can kind of change the world through design and others say no you can't change the world through design. Um, and I believe that well there's a role for us to play, right? And when you're in design, if you're in communication, there's definitely a very important role for you to play. And I overheard you talking about this not too long ago where you talked about how designers and people who can relay messages have a really critical role to play. And it really aligned with my thinking on that. I'm curious if you've had any new thoughts on that topic.
Yeah, I feel like we have a very special power, I would say, where we can sort of I wouldn't say manipulate because then it goes to like towards a negative word. But we have the power to change the way people see things. And I feel like that's very important. It's like a hidden super skill, you know? It's like an easy example with font. If you have a very like cringy font with like blood dripping off it and it says I will see you next, it's scary. And then the same way if it's like in this like really calligraphic like script, then it's like, oh, it's a love letter, so I feel like that can change a lot of ways how you see things, and people don't realize how powerful we are. We can make them look at things before we want them to look at other things, and I feel like that is what we need to use as an advantage to make people look at the things that are important and look at the things that are more important and make it more impactful for them. And they want to think about it even when they leave, and even if you pass the billboard, you want them to think about it for the next 20 minutes and actually do something about it.
Yeah, I completely agree. I've become fairly interested in behavioral sciences and decision making and what all these different ways that you can pose either the way you say it, the way you present it, the way the design is kind of wrapped around it. It can really further cement our habits and decision making, or it can completely change it some cases. And I think design has a huge role to play with it. It's also way misunderstood. Like it's because it's so subjective. It's almost too, I don't know if complex is the right word, but it's like too complex, I think, for people to really fully understand like how powerful it can be in persuading us or making us completely ignore something.
Definitely, I totally agree.
And it goes back to your original comment about showing your mom some options
Oh yeah, oh
and
yeah, it
studying,
does.
oh no, why did she like the decision making? It goes back to the original observation you had, which is when I present three options, there's a preference. And why is that? And so even at a young age, you're trying to figure out, is it color or what's the difference
Absolutely.
here, right?
And I feel like that's a lot that we do in UI UX design as well, where you look at things that you need to think about what kind of the color the button needs to be so that people click on it, and how much of a hierarchy do you need to give this box of text so that it's easily navigable to like to get there. And so I feel like just in general, it doesn't just apply to UI UX design, it applies to literally everything, because you see stop signs, you see all these different signs on the road, you see all these advertisements around. Everything is about hierarchy and everything is about what you choose first.
Completely agree. And I think the more you do it, the more you appreciate like the how it fits into the ecosystem. For the person who's seen it, what's their context? What did they do before this? What did they already like? What did they already do? What are they trying to solve? What did they do right before they saw this? What do we want them to do next? Um, and then that's, that can almost be overwhelming at times, but you start thinking like that.
Or
And especially in UX, it's where did they come from? Why are they here? What are they trying to accomplish? And think that's a great skill set to have. And you can apply it to almost anything in life, I think. Once you really understand like user experience, you can apply it to things that aren't UX.
Definitely. And I feel like that's there it's also a curse because once you understand it really well, you see bad design basically everywhere. You see bad fonts, you see bad ways of doing things, you see how people are using really bad hierarchy, and it just like you can't unsee it anymore. So I feel like it's also a curse, but it's definitely something that helps you in life in general. It comes back to the very basic skill of, do you put tomatoes or do you put a watermelon on top so that the other one's not squished? You know, it's really about hierarchy basically everywhere in life.
Yeah, it's yes. I'm reminded of it when I go to like the ATM. I'm like, why did they ask me that question before this question? You know, like
Absolutely.
I can't help it. I'm already critiquing. And then when they make an upgrade or something like that, I'm like, oh, this is great. This is much now it's 3 steps instead of the six.
Exactly.
Do you think people who get into design understand that they will become obsessed with prioritization and understanding almost like the psychology of the customer, the user? Do you think they have any clue, or do they come into it because they want to make beautiful work?
I feel like school definitely prepares you in a way that you know exactly what you're gonna do when you reach to a certain point. But it doesn't. I don't feel like all of them really understand the extent of it. I hope they do. But I don't believe that it's really inculcated by the start of like freshman year. Maybe by fourth year, maybe when you graduate and you have like a couple of years under your belt, maybe then, but it definitely takes time to understand that because it's also about how much you're learning, and it's also about how many skills that you put in it and the work that you do.
So you're in the City, Lawrence area. You're a KU grad. You're not a local to Kansas City.
Absolutely not.
Um, t has your uh, upbringing and your sort of point of view changed the way you approach design, or no? Do you think it's the same as most of your sort of cohorts, people who you came up with in school?
There's a big shift. There's a full 360, and it comes a lot with the kind of culture that you grew up with, because during school when my professor would give me references of old movies in Hollywood, or like old posters and pop culture, and I didn't know half of that. So I definitely brought a new perspective to the table because I looked at things the way that others didn't. And there's definitely that played as an advantage for me for sure, because I was making things the way not other people were, and that made me stand out. But at the same time, I feel like a lot of the things in design are they're very basic human skills, and that is the same in every culture. And so in some ways, yes, I was different, and in some ways my approach is different to things, but in some ways it's very similar because all humans think the same. um and I feel like in general the way you make something is very individualistic, and it depends on every single person. So even me and maybe my friend who's also from India, we still have so many differences, and we still have so many different ways of looking at things. And so it really depends on the way you want to make things, and make the poster actually come to the result.
I love that. Marketing is meant to be, if you're marketing, you're meant to stand out, right? If they blend in, that's not the point. That's not the point at all. And I really personally enjoy being working with people who relate to maybe being the outsider or having a different point of view and embrace it, and that they're not trying to become an insider. They're okay with being the outsider and having a different point of view. I think those are my favorite people to be around, and I think it creates for far better work because
Absolutely.
you're comfortable with it, right? Because that's what we're trying to do.
Definitely. And outsider so much so I didn't know what the coins meant for like the first 3 months at least. I went to the cashier and I was like, take whatever I owe you. I don't know what this means.
I trust you. I have no idea what this is. Yeah. What has been your experience with the native group? Because you did an internship, but then and now you're here full time. I mean, what has the experience been?
It's always been different. I actually did when I did two internships. So the first one was completely online, and I was working from India, and I was doing meetings at 4 a.m. because of the time difference. But it was still not in a way that I was like, oh my God, I don't want to do this, because it was so much fun, and I was doing like really nice projects that I was actually interested in. And the same with the second internship, where it was like I was doing a lot of the work that I was learning and getting trained for in school, but I was able to apply it. And that is something that I really enjoyed. And when I'm in full time, I feel like the way that we collaborate with the team and we make projects collectively, it's just not one person's project, is what really works with me, because I feel like everyone in the team touches the project, and it becomes like this team project that everyone has importance for. When we put stuff in awards, and when we put stuff and we win, right? It's like everyone's achievements, and it's about the success that everyone made. So I feel like that is what I really enjoy, the collaborativeness of like everything, basically each and every project.